Let me tell you something that still chills me to my bones. A story I never thought I would have the courage to share. When I was a child, life was never simple. My father worked far away, and my mother, Claire, was left to raise us mostly on her own. She was a strong woman, strict but loving, and she always had a watchful eye on me. I didn't understand her rules back then, but she carried secrets I would only discover years later. One of those secrets was the bitterness between her and her sister, my Aunt Linda. On the surface, Aunt Linda seemed like any other woman, smiling at neighbors, polite in public, but I always sensed something different in her, something sharp and unsettled in her presence. I was around 9 when I first began noticing things. My mother warned me not to spend time at Aunt Linda's house, but my cousin Melissa was there, and we loved each other's company. So, I disobeyed, sneaking over when I thought I could. The house itself was ordinary, but it felt heavy, as if the walls carried whispers. Uncle Robert, my aunt's husband, always made me uneasy. Even as a child, I could feel his eyes following me. Too close, too lingering. It wasn't just his presence that frightened me. Strange things started happening when I stayed there. My dolls would vanish only to reappear in odd places. At night, I would hear scratching sounds under the bed. Sometimes I'd wake up to find the window open, the curtain swaying, though Melissa swore she hadn't touched it. Once, I thought I saw something crouched in the corner of the room, darker than any shadow should be. When I blinked, it was gone. I told my mother about the whispers, about the shadows that moved on their own. Instead of comforting me, she scolded me. "Don't ever talk about such things," she warned, her voice trembling. "Spirits listen when you call them." I saw fear in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. From that day, she forbade me from going to Aunt Linda's home at all. But you see, evil doesn't stay behind closed doors. It follows. When I was 11, my mother fell ill. The doctors ran every test but could find no reason for her sickness. She grew weaker each day, coughing, her skin turning pale, her strength draining as though something was feeding on her life. One night, while she thought I was asleep, I heard her whisper to my father, "Linda cursed me. She never forgave me. She wants to see me ruined." I didn't understand the weight of those words then. Later, I learned the truth. Both sisters had once been promised to the same man, long before I was born. He chose my mother, and from that day on, Aunt Linda's bitterness only grew, like a shadow stretching across our family. As my mother grew weaker, my life became more tied to Aunt Linda's house. I would stay with Melissa, and though she tried to shield me, I could feel the poison in that place. Uncle Robert's stares grew bolder. His hands brushed too close. I was only a child, but I learned fear too early. And then there were the nights, the ones that etched themselves into my memory forever. One night, Melissa and I were in her room, whispering to each other after midnight. That's when we heard it, the sound of chanting. Low, guttural, rising from the floorboards themselves. At first I thought maybe it was the wind, but no. The words were too sharp, too deliberate. My cousin's hand gripped mine tightly. The chanting grew louder. Then the air in the room shifted, pressing down on us. We both looked toward the door, and before our eyes it creaked open, slowly. No footsteps, no one standing there, just darkness waiting. I wanted to scream, but my voice was locked in my throat. Then across the floor, a shadow began to stretch. Long fingers, claw-like, reaching toward me. It was not the shape of any person. It crawled like liquid darkness, and it reached for my legs. Melissa gasped, and in that moment I found my voice. I screamed. The door burst open, and Aunt Linda rushed in. But she didn't comfort us, didn't ask what had happened. No, her face was pale, her eyes wide with something between anger and fear. She looked at me, not Melissa, and whispered words I've never forgotten. "You weren't supposed to see this. You were never meant to know." That's when I realized, whatever lived in that house, whatever hunted me, wasn't a stranger to my aunt. She knew. She had brought it there, and from that moment on, it wanted me. After that night, I could no longer sleep peacefully in Aunt Linda's house. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for that chanting. And sometimes, It came. Not every night, but often enough that I began to dread the darkness. The shadows followed me even back to my own home. I would wake to whispers curling around me, words I couldn't understand, but the tone was always the same: mocking, taunting, hungry. My toys were moved, doors opened on their own, and once I woke with bruises on my arms in the shape of fingerprints. When I told my father, he brushed it aside as childhood imagination. My mother, though, she knew better. Her illness worsened with each passing day, and once she gripped my hand tightly and said, "Don't let your aunt near you. Promise me." I nodded, but how could I keep such a promise? My life was tangled with theirs, whether I wanted it or not. Melissa began noticing it too. She told me in hushed whispers that she'd seen her mother late at night in the basement, candles lit, strange symbols drawn on the floor. She said her mother would whisper names over and over, and one of those names was mine. I'll never forget the fear in Melissa's eyes when she told me, "She's offering you to it." After that, everything spiraled. One night, when the moon was full and the air felt unnaturally still, I woke in Melissa's room to the sound of scratching, not on the floor, not on the walls, from inside the closet. We froze, listening. The scratching turned into knocking, 3 sharp knocks. Then a voice, low and gravelly, called my name. I thought I would die of terror. Melissa tried to stay calm, whispering that maybe it was a dream. But when the closet door began to rattle on its hinges, we both screamed. Aunt Linda came running again. But this time, instead of fear, there was fury on her face. She grabbed my arm so hard it bruised and hissed, "Stop making noise. Do you want to wake it?" The way she said it. She wasn't warning me. She was blaming me, as though the thing in the closet was mine to control. I tried to pull free, but her grip tightened. And then, behind her, Uncle Robert appeared in the doorway, watching. His face in shadow, his eyes glinting with something I can't even describe. That night, I knew I was not safe in that house. Not from spirits, and not from the people living inside it. The days that followed blurred together. My mother grew too sick to move, and my father was away more than ever. I spent more and more time trapped in Aunt Linda's care. Each night the whispers grew bolder. They no longer just called my name. They promised things. Promised they could end my mother's suffering, if only I gave myself over. One night, I nearly did. I woke to find myself standing at the basement door, my hand on the handle, though I had no memory of leaving bed. Behind the door I could hear chanting again, and my aunt's voice among them. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body felt heavy, pulled down by an invisible force. I don't know what stopped me. Maybe Melissa, who appeared in the hallway and shook me awake. But the terror of knowing I could be drawn there against my will haunted me ever since. And then came the night I will never forget. Melissa and I were sitting in her room, candles lit because the power had gone out. The house was too quiet, except for the faint sound of wind outside. We thought maybe, for once, the night would pass without incident. We were wrong. The temperature dropped so suddenly that our breaths turned visible. The candles flickered wildly, then went out all at once. And in that pitch-black silence, we heard it. The sound of breathing. Not ours. Something else, standing right there with us. I whispered Melissa's name, but she didn't answer. When I turned, I saw her eyes wide, fixed on something behind me. I slowly turned around, and that's when I saw it. A figure, taller than any man, made of shadow but solid enough to block the faint moonlight seeping through the window. Its head bent unnaturally low, its limbs too long, its hands stretching toward me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My chest locked, my throat dry. The figure leaned closer, and though it had no face, I could feel it smile. Then, just as it was about to touch me, Melissa shouted my name. The sound broke the spell. I stumbled back, and the figure vanished into the darkness. Aunt Linda rushed in, furious, her face pale with rage. She looked at Melissa first, then at me, and said words that still haunt me to this day. If she lives, we all suffer. Do you understand that? It wasn't Melissa she meant. It was me. After that night, my father finally took me away. He returned home, saw the bruises on my arms, the terror in my eyes, and though he never admitted to believing in curses or spirits, he knew enough to get me out of there. We never went back to Aunt Linda's house again, but the scars remain. My mother never recovered fully from her illness. She passed not long after. Melissa and I grew distant, as though the weight of that house broke the bond we had. And Aunt Linda, I don't know what became of her. What I do know is this. Even now, years later, I still hear the whispers some nights. I still wake to the feeling of being watched. And sometimes, when the room is dark and silent, I swear I see a shadow move across the floor. It always stops at the edge of my bed, waiting.